What do you get when you combine massive scorn and basically neglect for this once international powerhouse company, combined with really good future prospects? You get Nokia, and Nokia is, in my opinion, like very, very undervalued. So today we're gonna be looking at 12 different things you need to know about Nokia. Those of you who grew up in the 90s probably remember the famous brick Nokia phone. They were invulnerable. You could use them for self-defense. You could block bullets with them. I had one and I freaking loved it, and I thoroughly played the game on it, where you were the snake and you ate the pellets and your tail got longer and stuff like that. I was pretty good at that game, I liked it. Take a look at the stock price chart going back to 1994. You can see they hit nearly 57 bucks in their heyday in 2000. But since then, we've seen competition from the likes of BlackBerry and Apple's iPhone slowly cut away. I think there was kind of a lot of internal strife within Nokia, which led to them becoming basically irrelevant, and then actually shifting their whole business model into a whole bunch of other things, which most people don't know about. And so when most people don't know these things, they think of that old brick phone that nobody has anymore, nobody cares about anymore. They're just like, why would you care about Nokia? Nokia's stupid. Why would I buy that? But actually, they're super not that anymore. And so their stock price has been largely beaten down much before the pandemic hit the scene. So today we're gonna take a look at who they are, what they do, what's so special about them, what market position they hold in the world, and then finally I'm gonna share some of my price targets and some of the other financials, as well as what I'm doing with Nokia. So if you've been following us for a little while, we've been looking at companies like Salesforce, Dropbox, Datadogs, things like that. These are all software as a service, SaaS companies. And so thing you need to know about Nokia, number one, is that they are trying to power and be one of the world leaders in this international transition to SaaS. So typically in the past, large companies have had monolithic databases and data storage, and they've been powering the world from all over the place. But more and more we're seeing shifts to more cloud-based software, cloud-based services. And in the Salesforce video, I mentioned Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, talking about many years ago, he was predicting that in the future, no longer will people be having like big, powerful computers in their house and having to buy software all the time. Like basically everything will just be done over the internet because the internet's getting so much faster now. And so we're seeing this whole international shift into being more and more like that. And Nokia is like the highway that allows that to happen. So Nokia makes the bulk of its revenue from communications service providers, CSPs. So when you're thinking about like in Japan here, it's like SoftBank, Docomo, AU. In the US, it would be like AT&T, Verizon. Like these are Nokia's biggest customers. They're also looking forward to large growth in 5G networking, submarine networks, edge computing, and fiber optics and things like that going forward. Number two, CSPs are their largest clients. It's no longer you and me. As you know, since about 2018, the world has been switching over to 5G. One of the really interesting things that we see as consumers is like, for example, Apple iPhone, oh, it's now 5G, and Android has been offering 5G for a little while now. And a lot of people are getting their 5G phones and being like, dude, it's only a little bit faster, or I don't have 5G outside of major city centers, or things like that. Nokia is behind the scenes working with a lot of the biggest CSPs in the world, helping them to figure out how to roll it out, how to optimize their systems, how to get all the hardware working right. And actually in this last year, probably actually thanks to the pandemic going on, the networks are needing to beef up. And so Nokia is behind the scenes helping them. So we've seen sales numbers and profitability numbers growing in the last year, but we're also going to see that continuing in the coming years. I'll go into this in a few more points, but also Nokia has positioned themselves to be Europe's leading researcher into rolling out 6G standardization protocol and stuff like that going into the future as well. So Nokia low-key is one of those like behind-the-scenes companies that not many people know about, and that's why it's such a really good value right now as a stock. The really good thing about having these communication service providers as their largest clients is that basically these are a matter of national security, so a lot of them are actually backstopped by the government and supported by the government. But the other side of the double-edged sword is that these CSPs are so large and so powerful that they have a lot of negotiating power against Nokia, and they're also happy to work with numerous other companies like Ericsson or Huawei or things like that too. Number 3, Nokia is reorganizing into 4 major business segments. The first one is mobile networks. This segment powers wireless telecommunications providers by helping them upgrade and expand their 5G networks. This includes network planning, deployment, optimization, and tech support. This segment makes up about 10 billion euros of sales over the last year, which is by far their largest market segment. They've also been strengthened by growth in ORAN and vRAN, open radio access networks and virtual radio access networks, and Nokia is investing for the long term to become a market leader. Nokia owns a 27% market share of 4G and 5G outside of China. So think about like 1/4 of everything happening in the entire telecommunications business is like powered by Nokia. That's how big they are. Though they're expecting a near zero operating margin in 2021, they're expecting large gains going forward as R&D pays off and cost reduction measures kick in. Number 4, the second biggest market segment is network infrastructure, which makes about 7 billion euro annually. The network infrastructure segment is primarily focused on IP networks, optical networks, fixed networks, and submarine networks. What are submarine networks, you wonder? Basically, the huge cables that go under the ocean and connect Australia and Asia and North America. These are submarine networks. And so Nokia is very involved with developing those and connecting those and upgrading those all around the world. As well as optical networks, fiber optic that goes to your house or goes to businesses or things like that. Nokia is also behind a lot of that. Check it out, they've provided this chart that shows their market share. They have a global one and then excluding China. They do a lot of stuff in China, but they're not the biggest in China. And China is becoming massively super huge because its population is 1/7 of the entire planet. So check it out, CSP IP routing, 18% global share, optical networking, 11% global share, and fixed access, that's like, cables connecting you to the internet, 19%. But when you exclude China, it's 25, 17, and 32%. In optical networking, they're ranked number 3, including China in the world. In fixed access, they're number 2, including China, and number 1, excluding China. And they're number 1 in submarine networks in the world. In this segment, they're currently hitting high single-digit operating margins or profit margins, and it looks like things are going to be getting better going into the next couple of years. Number 5. The next market segment is cloud and network services. Cloud and network services makes up about 3 billion in annual sales, so it's much smaller than the previous 2 segments, but in my opinion, this is going to be the most crucial segment for their growth going forward. They're projecting about a 2% CAGR compound annual growth rate in the coming 3 years, which sounds really small, especially when you're used to a lot of companies, tech companies that we've been looking at recently on the channel. But when you're talking about like super world-changing amounts of infrastructure and wiring and all this stuff all around the world, it's hard to tip that scale and move that needle significantly. And so don't get too down on those numbers. And again, we'll be looking at the balance sheet and stuff in a moment here. But basically, cloud and networking services is made up of things like communication software, mobile and converged core solutions, enterprise solutions, cognitive services, and managed services. A lot of those are pretty straightforward, but cognitive services are basically AI centered, like machine learning type things. And so Nokia is also getting into like cybersecurity and a lot of AI type related solutions like autonomous driving and things like that. So Nokia has a lot of stuff going on in like a lot of different industries. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, software as a service is becoming more and more a thing for everybody all over the world, especially with work at home and travel restrictions and things like that happening. And Nokia is positioning themselves to be crucial in that whole world transition. Right now, this segment is at mid-single digit profit margins. They're expecting that to go up maybe even into double digits in the coming years as they power the world's transition to SaaS. Number 6, the 4th segment of Nokia's business model is Nokia Technologies. And this one's super interesting, and I really didn't have any idea of it because Nokia is very good at saving money and also plowing a lot of money back into R&D, research and development. And as a result, they have more than 20,000 patents that they license out, 3,500 of which are 5G related, making them number 1 in the world for licensing patents out to other companies that end up using them in their own 5G products. They've worked with loads of big players, as this list shows: Huawei, Apple, BlackBerry, HTC, LG, Samsung, Apple, Xiaomi, Huawei, Oppo, Viva, Samsung. and they've achieved the objectives that were required. This is also a really important segment for the company and probably arguably the most profitable as well, although it only makes up about 1.4 billion annual sales. So it pales in comparison to the earlier segments in terms of revenues. In the coming years, they're expecting a slight boost to operating margins in this segment as well. Number 7, 5G phones are starting to be everywhere, but 5G itself isn't. And like I mentioned earlier, you might have a 5G phone and connect to it and be like, dude, this is the same speed as 4G, or even slower in a lot of cases. Or if you go outside of the city centers, you can't even get 5G. And so 5G has been rolled out, and there, you have this interesting dynamic in telecommunications where companies kind of need to rush to be like, hey world, we're the first ones with the best 5G network, switch to us now, bro. But what ends up happening is that it's only available in a very restricted location or locations. And so rolling that out, especially in countries as large as the US or Canada, takes like years. And what we're gonna see is Nokia being able to profit off of that transition over the coming years. Another really interesting facet, like I mentioned, they're getting into autonomous vehicles. They're also getting into Internet of Things. So that's like smart fridges and smart homes where the lighting, you can control the lighting with your cell phone. Smart like ovens and toasters so you can start baking when you're not home. All of this is going to become more and more normal in the coming years, especially with 5G proliferation. And so Nokia is behind that in the actual devices themselves, but also in the networks powering those things. And when it comes to autonomous vehicles and 5G, you have to have a really solid network. You have to have connectivity everywhere. And with all the data going back and forth, 5G might be required to be able to capture it all. So even though 5G might not seem like a big thing for you right now, or you might even be disappointed with 5G, I know a lot of people who've been kind of bummed out by it, the fact that it still has a long runway before it starts to roll out and then eventually into 6G in around 2030, I think Nokia has positioned itself in the market where it's like super necessary to work with them. So that will provide growth going into the future as well. Number 8, their new CEO, Pekka Lundmark, was hired last year. So I think a lot of people have this idea that Nokia has just sucked for a long time and they're not really willing to make any changes. But actually they've been through a few CEOs in recent years, and Pekka Lundmark was actually at Nokia up until about 2000. He left for 20 years and has made a bunch of progress for companies like the one Fordham he was a CEO at previous to Nokia. And I think he's coming in with the right kind of mindset, keeping costs low, keep money going into R&D, keep being a world leader as far as like patents and things like that, all while keeping the company lean, keeping strong cash flows going and a strong cash position as well. So I'm kind of excited to see how he mixes things up going forward. Number 9? Nokia is going to lead the European Union's 6G research initiative. So for a company that you may consider as being a has-been, it would be impossible for them to get these kinds of contracts. I didn't really know Nokia was such a big global leader, but the Hexa-X project, which started on January 1st, with a planned duration of 30 months, has goals including creating unique 6G use cases and scenarios, developing fundamental 6G technologies, and defining a new architecture for an intelligent fabric that integrates key 6G technology enablers. This is from RCR Wireless. Number 10, Nokia is also doing a lot of other stuff like cybersecurity and getting internet on the moon, bro! They've made a deal with NASA to get internet. Some places say 4G, some sources say 5G on the moon. For those of you guys who are here to get the stock to the moon Lambo bros, this is the stock for you. You need internet on the moon because you'll probably be there in a few months anyways. Number 11, financials are looking super solid. Let's take a look at some of these charts they've provided as well as the balance sheet. Check it out here. They have net sales on the left and operating margins on the right, broken down by these different segments I was mentioning earlier. So the dark gray is networks. So that shows you that that makes up the vast majority of their sales. Nokia Technologies, Nokia Software, and Group Common and Other piled up on top there, the light gray, black, and white. And then you can see improving operating margins in the last few quarters. We're about to see a new earnings report coming up here in probably a few weeks as well. So I'm excited to see how that looks. Going down the next chart here, components of operating profit, we see the light blue bar is non-IFRS, which is basically non-GAAP for us non-Europeans. We see that trending up nicely to the right, which is something we're expecting to see in the coming years as well. They show net cash and current financial investments at $1.9 billion, $0.2 billion up over a year ago in 2019. And then we see total cash and current financial investments at $7.6 billion, which is up $1.6 billion from a year ago. Next, they provided some consolidated numbers for us at a quick glance. Go over to the fourth column. It says Q1, Q3, 2020. And then next to that was the year before that. So comparing the first 3 quarters of 2020 to 2019, I especially wanted to look at, it looks like a 7% loss in net sales, but you go down 3 lines to operating margin percent, and you see a big gain actually, 480 basis points, up to almost 3%. That's really interesting, even though there was a sales decrease. And I think part of that is made up of cost cutting, as well as a transition to more software rather than hardware sources of income. Next, a quick look at assets from investing.com. Check it out, $38 billion in assets, compared to total current liabilities down there at $11.3 billion. So generally speaking, if a company has a lot more assets than liabilities, it's very, very safe. And one of the really crazy things we see about Nokia right now is that the market cap of the company, I think, is only like 20 billion, but they have 38 billion worth of equipment and patents and all these other things. So it's like the market is severely underestimating and undervaluing this company. Number 12, cash is flowing. We're seeing really healthy cash flows from Nokia. Check it out. They mentioned here in Q1 2019, Nokia established a free cash flow program to ensure company-wide focus on free cash flow and release of net working capital, including project asset optimization, review of contract terms and conditions, and a bunch of other stuff. So they're basically saying, in all of these different segments, like we're no longer comfortable with like one segment making all the money and the other segment losing a bunch of money. They're figuring out how all of them, looked at as individual businesses, can be actually providing free cash for the greater company as a whole. And as a result, they showed a 21% quarter-over-quarter change from the second quarter to the third quarter there, and an 8% year-to-date change as well. And their debt to capital ratio only sits at about 25%. So that shows that they're very conservative in the way that they don't use debt to grow. They just use cash, they save it, and then they grow using that cash. It'll be interesting to see if they start to utilize more debt to boost that growth rate. Maybe things can grow quicker, but at the same time, I kind of like this business model. Personally, that's kind of how I run my businesses here too. But I think this might also be one of the reasons so many people are sleeping on this company, because it doesn't show super huge aggressive annual growth rates or things like that. Check it out here. I found this chart of valuations. Look at the price to cash flow going from 2010 all the way over to 2019, and then the trailing 12 months, the TTM. We've seen it as high as 99 in 2019. So this is saying you're paying a lot of money for the amount of cash flow you're getting in 2019, but in the recent quarter, 7.4, it dropped. It dropped because we saw the cash flows go up while the stock price basically stayed at like $2-3. Other key financial indicators, like taking a look at some of the big broad strokes like EV over EBITDA, enterprise value over EBITDA, is like a hair over 9, which is crazy compared to a lot of the other companies in kind of the same market. So what do you guys think about Nokia? What am I gonna do about it? I think it's kind of nuts. Like, I was just kind of sleeping on this stock too. I'm like, yeah, Nokia, brick phones, whatever, it's stupid. But now that I've looked into it, I'm like, dude, they're actually behind so much of what we do every day around the world, whether you're here in Japan or you're in the US or you're in Belgium, like whatever. They're very, very international, and they've positioned themselves to keep growing forward into the future. I'm excited to see what the new CEO is going to bring in, as well as, you know, the whole world transitioning to 5G and then eventually 6G. And Nokia has already positioned themselves to be one of the leaders in 6G as well. Right now, the stock price is sitting at about $4 or $5. It already made a huge jump last week, and I really wouldn't be surprised if we start to see more jumps coming forward here. Conservatively, I think by 2023, this stock, I really wouldn't be surprised if it's 17 or 18 bucks. If not, 20, 25 bucks. And so I've actually already had Nokia, but I'm going to be adding more. I may be grabbing some Leaps as well. If you want to know what that is, ask me down in the comment section. But what do you guys think about Nokia? I'm super excited about Nokia. And actually, while I was doing research, I found out that the whole Wall Street's bet army is about to jump into this too. I don't think that should be a solid strategy for the long term looking at a company. Nokia is legit, like, has really strong fundamentals. unlike GameStop, like what we've seen in the last few days with GameStop. But a bunch of people made a bunch of money on GameStop, and Citron lost a bunch of money. So if you are going to play it like that, I think you're probably going to be all right with Nokia. But I'm personally looking at it as kind of like 2022, 2023, maybe even longer of a hold. And I'm really excited for good growth because it's so beaten down, so neglected by the market. What do you guys think? Looking forward to your comments down in the comments section below. Thank you guys very much for your time. Have a great one. Love you and talk to you soon.